Laos, or as it's colloquially known, Muang Lao, is a landlocked country in the heart of mainland Southeast Asia, bordered by Burma, China, Vietnam, and Cambodia. I've come here to test out the phenomenal new Fujifilm XH-1, a camera I've been dying to get my hands on, and this adventure trip is going to be just the place to test it out. Welcome to a new series where we take tech on the road, explore a travel destination, and test the gear out in real life. This is Field Tested. Laos's official name is the Lao People's Democratic Republic, and it traces its historic and cultural identity to the Len Xang Hom Cow Kingdom, or as it was known, the Kingdom of a Million Elephants Under the White Parasol. Isn't that poetic? Whilst Laos is a multi-ethnic country, it's politically and culturally dominated by the Lao people, who make up about 55% of the population, who live mostly in the lowlands. Then you've got the Khmer, Hmong, and indigenous hill tribes that account for about 45% of the population in the foothills and mountains. It's a beautiful country with unspoiled nature, and it's largely because it hasn't been developed like the rest of Southeast Asia for two main reasons. Firstly, over 2 million tons of ordnance were dropped on the country in bombing missions during the Vietnam War, despite it having no role officially in the war. And secondly, there's still a lot of corruption at the higher levels, which has inhibited foreign investment. I've specially come at this time of year for Pimay, which is the Lao New Year, and it's a huge water fight, so it's the perfect opportunity to test out the XH-1, which is meant to be one of the most waterproofed mirrorless cameras on the market. This is a really nice camera in the hand, much chunkier than the other Fujifilm cameras, but it's got a lot to like about it. I also took along the 100-400 lens, the 50-140, the 56mm APO lens, the 90mm macro, a bunch of spare batteries, and the grip. And to compare it, I've brought along the fantastic X-T2. Now, both of these are using the same 24.2 megapixel X-Trans 3 sensor. They both have ISO up to 12,800 and extendable up to 51,000, the same tilting LCD screen, AF joystick, the same continuous shutter speeds up to 8,000 mechanical, 32,000 electronic, flash sync of 1/250th, dual SD card slots, and they support UHS 2 cards. However, the XH-1 is the first to sport full 5-axis in-body image stabilization. Just arrived in Luang Prabang in northern Laos, so let's hit the street. Taking a look at the madness on the streets during Pimay Lao, you might think that it's just a party, and it certainly is a party and a great time of fun and celebration where people and families come together. And yes, the young people are drinking and having a great time, but there is a cultural and religious element to it. It's their new year, and water is seen as purifying, a sign of renewal. So whilst at first, especially when you have cameras, it might seem like having water thrown at you all the time is some kind of an assault, it's actually the opposite. It's a sign of respect. If you were to walk through there and they weren't cleansing you with water, that would be incredibly rude. So it's good luck for them and you to have you doused in water and cleaned at this time of year. Now, I especially came to Luang Prabang for this festival because it's just so off the hook here, and Luang Prabang is a famous place for all of its temples and religious sites. But just taking a couple of streets off the main street and suddenly you're back to peace and quiet, and you can enjoy the serene nature with only the faint music in the background of the party that's going on a few blocks away. Now, whilst the purification is also going on in the temples, it's for the Buddhas. So if you want a peaceful refuge, go into one of the temples, see them watering the Buddhas and the stupas, and you can have a really peaceful cultural experience away from the madness on the street. Now, the center of Luang Prabang is on a large peninsula, and just outside in the river there's an island, and they have a big festival there. It's music, dancing, more party, less cars, and a great place to go and see them forming the stupas, which are again part of the annual celebration. They use the sand from the Mekong Delta and decorate them as an offering to the gods. Okay folks, so today, day 2 in Luang Prabang, headed to the Wang Si Waterfalls. Little markets here. I actually came here a few years ago and shot with a model in the waterfall. Hopefully we're here early enough that it's not too crazy busy inside. Remember, Matt, green means slippery. Half an hour drive from the northern capital of Luang Prabang are the Wang Si Falls. Unbelievably gorgeous waterfalls, and yes, it's a touristy spot, but whether you're going to take a dip or to take some photos, it's an absolutely beautiful location. I did tempt fate and go into the water, but I was really careful, and I was using the housing when I wasn't filming myself to get some shots of the waterfall from within the waterfall itself. And from the drone eye view, you can see just how far this chain of waterfalls extends through the jungle. Really beautiful. Hey folks, so today was really fun. I have to say I'm loving shooting with the XH-1. I'm a big fan of the X-T2, but having them both side by side and the same lens options, I still always find myself going towards the XH-1. The stabilization is great in video. I think it's performing as good as any mirrorless camera that I've used for smoothing out the shots. Really, really great results. Ergonomically, this is probably the best mirrorless camera I've used. The Leica SL is really nice, but I think the grip on this is even better, and the weight distribution is a lot better. With the grip, even better, but as it is, I feel like this is a nice chunky, feels nice in the hand with good access to all the dials. I'm really liking the way this one is working out, and the results from wading into that waterfall were, I think, worth it. And yes, I was being very careful and using my housing and all of that kind of thing when I wasn't getting behind the scenes snaps. That moment when you realize there's literally thousands of spiders running all over the water. Should have worn shorter shorts. Now the parade for Pimai goes through the main street of town. They do it twice over 2 days. And again, it's a huge celebration, and don't think that these people, because they're in fancy clothes, get spared from getting watered down. Once they get down into the party area, they all get a good hosing off as well. You can see each of the different ethnic minority tribes are represented here, and Miss Luang Prabang beauty pageant is announced and the winner is shown off at the festival as well. Another great celebration, a little bit touristy, but it's mainly local tourists in attendance. I really enjoyed shooting with it. I have to say though, there were a couple of times that it froze up. One was resolved by taking the grip on and off. That actually happened to me yesterday. So last night I updated the firmware, made sure it's all up to date, and still I had a couple of times where it just froze up and I had to go find a safe place, take it out of the housing, take the battery out, reset it for it to keep going. It just locked up for some reason. That happened twice today. But other than that, the performance of the camera when it's not locked up is really good, and I'm really getting the shots that I'm after. The focus seems fast enough to keep up in 95% of the time. I don't think it's keeping up with what I would get with my D850 though. It was an incredibly warm afternoon, and I had stopped for afternoon tea at a little cafe and was looking at the locals carrying on with the New Year's festivities. So I actually bought a couple of bottles of beer and then went out to join them. And it was the best fun of the trip. For the next hour or two, we drank beer together, squirted water on each other and passers-by, and celebrated the Lao New Year as one of the locals. It was really a great experience. But I do have a confession, and it's the most easily foreseeable outcome in a shooting situation like that. I did water damage both of the cameras. I had left the party zone, was at a dinner, reviewing the images in the safety of an indoor restaurant, walked a block back to my hotel, which was also away from the party zone, and someone came with a giant bucket of water and just threw it over me. The XH-1 got a direct hit, completely soaked through. The XT2 was on the far side, but it still got quite wet. As soon as I got back to the hotel, I went and asked the restaurant for 2 big bags of rice. I put the cameras in each one to get the rice to soak the water out. By morning, the XH-1 had come back to life and was working fine again. And I'm filming this after the fact. I can tell you, unfortunately, the XT2 never recovered. Now, that's by no means a sample size that's scientific, but the XH-1 got a much worse hit of water and survived. The XT2 got less wet and died. Next up, my guide and I headed out on a road trip to visit the remote hill tribes in a rural part of northern Laos. I spent a full day traveling to see the nomadic hill tribes, and it was an incredible experience. I didn't see another tourist the entire time I was there. And interestingly, each village, which you mightn't know was a village as an outsider, where they began and ended, had one of these entrance gates that seemed to me to have all kinds of wooden decorations that looked like spears and chains and birds, all made out of wood, and it has some special significance for the community, and it's involved in the wedding ceremonies for anyone from that village as well. So this is a Khmer village, and this is the traditional style of their house. So a kitchen on the outside, kind of a living room here, and then inside one big bedroom that's shared by everyone. You can see this, maybe you can see there's corn and stuff drying up on the awning there. Visiting the hill tribes was an absolute joy. It was quite a unique experience. Yes, it seemed like they do get the occasional tourist, but I didn't see any whilst I was there. And it was generally a really welcoming environment. You could tell that they're living a traditional lifestyle, but still they were really warm. They invited me in. One particular family invited me in, and there was 3 generations, the patriarch, his couple of wives, and all of their kids there having their New Year's celebration. They just killed a pig and invited us to stay for lunch. Now, filming in this dark home, the XH-1 really did well. I thought the image quality that we're getting up here is just beautiful. The colors look great despite it being incredibly low light. We're basically just window light from the 2 open doors lighting the entire place. Now, I didn't film in a log format. This is as it came out of the camera, and personally, I think the colors and the overall image performance in video is really quite impressive. X-Trend sensor is rightly praised for delivering fantastic detail, but also color. They don't go to nearly as high resolution as DSLR sensors, but the X-Trend sensor design is different to DSLR, and you do still yield a whole load of detail. I have to say I'm completely satisfied with the image quality I got on this trip. Hey folks, so back at the hotel now after a long day out shooting some local hill tribes. It was really fun. And I have to say, the XH-1 really impressed me. I had it and my D850 on either side, and I find myself reaching for this at least as often, maybe more. It might have been the lens selection I had for it. But one thing I found really useful in that situation, and I think this would apply equally to any kind of candid shooting like street photography, was that it's really quiet. I personally have mixed feelings about the needing to cover over your brand names and stuff to be discreet on the street. But certainly having a click this loud, can you even hear it? If the subject doesn't hear it going off, then it doesn't interrupt the moment and you get whatever the interaction or the natural expression on their face was before you pulled out your camera. Now, that's not to say that I'm a ninja when I shoot. I still like to make eye contact, interact with the people. But when something really sweet is going on and I want to capture that, not people's reaction to a thud, 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 thud of my shutter, the silent shutter works really well. And everything else was seamless. There was no freeze-ups today. Touch to focus was working great. You know, it's a little bit laborious having to switch the dial back and forward between shooting and video. But overall, I think the results are coming up really nicely and I'm really enjoying shooting with this. Here's more of the images. Let me know your thoughts as a comment below. And again, if you want to join me in Laos for 2019, check out the card above or the link below. The capital city of Laos is Vientiane, and it has just under 1 million people, which sounds relatively small, but it's still got that chaotic vibe of Southeast Asia. Coming back from the regional areas, it did feel pretty overwhelming, and to be honest, I got out of the city as quick as I could and took a drive up along the Mekong River, stopping at a series of small temples. At each one, I met no one there other than locals and monks. It's unfortunate that's the first temple I've come across here where they don't allow any photos inside, but it's gorgeous. That might be, well, it's definitely my favorite temple in Laos. Probably one of my favorites. Definitely one of my favorites. Oh, this beautiful thing has kind of a morbid past. So, don't know when, thousands of years ago, when this was Hindu, a woman jumped into a hole right where that lingam, or phallus as they call it, is, and was buried there with a horse and a rock and something else. And she turned into a spirit. She's now the spirit of the city, and that point is exactly where they measure distances from. That's the center of Vientiane. But when the king moved the capital from Luang Prabang to here, he changed it to being Buddhist, and now all of the iconography has changed. And I think they've even inscribed a Buddha onto the phallus marker. If you do visit Laos, certainly it's worth coming and taking a look at Vientiane, but most of the interesting things are hidden away or on the outskirts, and you'll quickly want to leave the capital city to go explore the rural and regional areas surrounding it. Okay folks, so back in New York now. I've actually been back a little while, had time to review my images, and I've sent the cameras back to B&H. If you want to buy one of them, check out their links in the caption below. If you were looking to rent one for yourself, check out Lens Pro to Go, the series sponsor, also in the description. Traveling through Laos was an absolute joy, and the Pimai Festival was so great, and visiting the hill tribes really special. If you want to join me on my 2019 tour, check out mattgranger.com/Laos. There's a card above. I've organized a really sweet tour for early 2019. Now, in terms of the cameras and lenses that I took away, I absolutely love shooting with the XH-1. I think it's a phenomenal mirrorless camera. In terms of ergonomics, I would say other than really primo things like the X1D, I'd say it has the best ergonomics I've used. It was really great in the hand. It felt chunky, it felt solid, and it felt reliable. And it was responsive, fast. The sealing held up to really tough conditions when the X-T2 failed. That's by no means scientific that they both got hit, one survived and the other didn't, but I did feel like the XH-1 was overall better built. In terms of image quality, between the two of them, you really can't split it. They're both using the same 24 megapixel X-Trans 3 sensor. I really like the picture coming off them. I have kind of been spoiled and gotten used to high resolution, but 24 megapixels is absolutely fine for almost every application, and I think most people would find it fine to work with. I also found the video off the XH-1 was fantastic, having the log modes available. The stabilization was really great. You know, all the rest. The battery life is quite good for a camera in this category. Dual cards, it all performed really well. Can't complain. Now, in terms of lenses, again, no complaints. All of the Fuji lenses that I've used have generally been either very good to excellent. On this trip, I found myself using a lot the 56mm. It was the APD version. I really liked the results, and even though that kind of a lens can tend to be a little slow to focus, on the XH-1 I found it fine. Occasionally in fast-moving things, I would be tracking the face and eyes, and a couple of the shots would have gotten the temples. It had missed it, but generally it kept up with everything, and for most travel purposes, I think it'll perform just fine. I also found myself using the 50-140 a lot, and the ultra-wide obviously for the things like the waterfalls. The image quality is great, the handling is great. I also personally like the styling of it. So there's really a lot to like there. If you're looking for a travel camera or just an overall camera and don't need ultra high resolution, then I think the XH-1 is a great option, especially if you're going to do some video work, because the video specs on that one far exceed anything else that Fuji has put out. Let me know what you're shooting with, and if you find any limitations using APS-C mirrorless that you'd like to see improved. Leave me your questions and comments. I'll see you in the next episode of Field Tested.